In this video, I'm gonna teach you everything you need to know about joining the human body, from theory to practice. When I was just starting out, I used to think that if I could learn to join each body part first, I would be able to join a pose by combining them after. But I was wrong. A big mistake beginners often make is to directly start with anatomy, but the art of sketching the human body is called figure drawing, and anatomy is just but a part of the process and is not even the most important. Instead, you always need to draw from rough to clean, from the overall image to a more individual depiction. First, gesture. If you look up its definition, gesture is a flow, movement, or action capturing the essence, energy, or feeling of a subject. In drawing, it is basically lines that match the subject's motion, effectively conveying its intent. It is usually associated with the human body but exists in everything. I think of it as the design of the line itself, influencing rhythm, balance, and unity. Its main particularity is that it's simplified and quick, serving as a rough sketch's foundation. Line art also contribute by conveying force, emphasis, and depth. It is a great way to make a pose feel more alive and natural, valuable for practice, study, or as a part of the process itself. Gestural drawing can blow in and loose for capturing movement, or roughen texture when applying detail, although the latter leans more into the territory of expressive mark making. Notable gesture type apart from the center line includes contour gesture to capture shape and movement at the same time, cross contour to show form and direction in 3D space. Let's now have a look at simple anatomy. The body is made up of the head, torso, arms, and legs. The torso has two main masses, the pelvis and the rib cage. The stomach area connects the two, and the neck, head to torso, and the limbs are divided into the joints, upper and lower section, and the extremities. The posterior partly serves as a joint of the leg but is also a separate area on its own. There are also features that vary by gender, such as the breast in females. Finally, the extremities and head are details that deserve their own video. As for proportion, this is how it looks like in an ideal fashion. The upper body, head included, is equal in length to the lower body, which are the legs. The elbow arc needs to align with the belly button and the hands slightly below the crotch. Horizontally, the shoulders are about 1.5 to 2 head widths. From there, the body follows different silhouettes like a rectangle or a trapezoid. I can talk to you about precise measurement with head chart, but in practice we just eyeball everything except for special cases like character design sheet, and there are just no correct answers as proportion are mostly decided by the design. Balance is a subset of gesture that can be applied to figure drawing as well. Stability depends on where the weight is resting. The center of gravity should align with that base of support. Usually it's on one leg, both feet, or the posterior, although that may be breached if the subject was mid-action, which in that case, the line of action helps maintain the main directional flow of the pose, stable or not. It all boils down to the concept of force and interaction, like how gravity affects the body, or a heavy load redistributes the weight and push the posture. That aside, these are a few terms that you might find useful to know. Contrapposto is when the body naturally tries to balance itself when the pelvis is tilted by shifting the shoulder in the opposite direction. Tension and compression is a very simple rule where one side of the body stretches while the other contracts, like in a bag of beans. Landmarks are specific points on the body to help with proportion and movement, mainly derived from bony protrusion that do not vary that much depending on body type. First, there is the center line that connects the sternum, belly button, and pubic bone in the front, commonly forming a C or S curve that often influences the rest of the pose. The spine runs down the back in a single line for gesture, but may be later divided into 4 sections when dealing with structure because of an individual motion range. Lateral landmarks consist of the acromion process, clavicles above, and ascis below, which help define torso tilt and movement, while the spine of the scapula, scapular ridge, guide the back along with the psoas. These landmarks will also serve as details to fill in later. For the limbs, the greater trochanter marks the hip's outermost point. The knee has a distinct bone on its own, but is even more complicated on the outside, while the ankle is shaped like a wrench, locking the feet in place. The shin is the front part of the lower legs that is relatively flat and has sharp edges. The armpit serves as a bridge connecting the torso to the arm rather than a rigid connection. The elbow is the joint that connects the forearm and upper arm, and is just the end of the next bone. Finally, the wrist as a unusually flat shape resembling a cube. Supination is the outward rotation of the forearm, turning the palm around. There is first what I call the box method, where it represents different sections of the body with simple 3D forms such as cube, sphere, and cylinder. This is the most recurring technique taught out there, and I think it's a good way to start for a beginner. Something that you could immediately use next time, easy and calculated, trait that every newcomer wish for. Nice. I even still use this approach when the pose I need is a simple one made just to showcase the character. But eventually, you'll need to tackle the organic route if you want to conquer dynamic poses that focus on gesture. The body is just so flexible, but restricting it with rigid boundaries like a box doesn't really let you capture its nature in its full extent. Let me introduce you to the quick sketch exercise. It's a practice where you try to copy a pose from a reference, only for a set amount of time, starting from 30 seconds. I recommend using live action references, but it's still okay otherwise. The goal is to lay down the gesture with the minimum amount of lines possible, making this wavy stickman at the end. The brain adapts and often become more creative when restricted, and you won't get distracted by the details with a timer. It's just a practice, so do not fret about the result yet, but focus on being quick and gaining confidence. The exercise can be adjusted by gradually increasing the duration over time, along with the amount of details you add. Results will shift from a simple stick figure focused on gesture to a fully detailed body when you are around the 20-minute mark. When I draw a pose for an actual illustration, I could start with a simple form as per the box method. Start with a wave stickman, or even both with the form on top of the gesture, to be later overlaid by the final line art with finer details. A process a novice might have to follow in the beginning, but nowadays only have rough and clean as the only steps, and think of the rest as helpers that I can always go back to when I'm feeling lost, which typically occurs in just a specific part of the drawing. The more time I spend, the more I notice my mistakes. This is why I often redraw and transform along the way. It's especially heightened during the line art, but I won't take my time to fix the lower layers. We covered all of these theories in the beginning, but only indirectly apply them during a drawing session, and use both anatomy and gesture in tandem to each other, two concepts that you'll often see blend into one another. Knowing all of that, the next step to upgrade the skills is to dedicate study session with the following goals. Learn more about each body part while drawing them in different angles. Try experimenting with different body designs, two things that we'll discuss further in the advanced section. I also wrote few resources that I recommend for study in the description below. But remember, this is a study to improve your existing poses, and not a starting point. You'll pick up hints of these concepts anyway through sketches and illustrations. I directly try to tackle the pose's gesture and structure at the same time. That's why I may not finish the gesture until the end before I fill in the form, and instead hopping between the two while fixing mistakes along the way. Though I still did the bare minimum in the beginning there, that are needed to keep the poses overall unity and direction. It's all about the mindset of define and refine. Both exist in every stage, but the defining here is the priority. Focus on the general image and slowly divide your attention. The goal is to just have something because our brain is better at fixing than creating. The most important is to be fast and going with the flow without overthinking it. Being 100% accurate with the reference is not really what you want to do, nor should you aim for perfection in general. Finished is better than abandoned. For beginners who still lack confidence,
It might be a good idea to do each step separately until the end so it feels like it's moving.
I draw the line of action, or usually just imagine it in mind, to make sure the pose follows the overall direction if necessary. There are these simple shapes such as egg shape or underwear shape, a combination of form and gesture to quickly block out body part that are sometimes used as helpers, especially when they are hidden in the reference. Silhouette is probably the most important aspect that you need to look out for during this stage, as it determines the overall pose's identity and just how interesting it is. That's why I often focus my attention on the most defining part of a pose, by not just looking at the inside of the subject, but also the negative space. An important tip when drawing limbs is that they gradually taper down as you approach a hand.
You can also use value to recognize muscle shape, and use them as details by marking the light boundary in a lighter stroke.
And the body's anatomy itself follows a natural flow of asymmetry. Also talked about head and extremity being separated on their own, but you have to consider how the general form and gesture fit in with the pose, because them being present or not drastically changes the overall vision. Even though I already included some of the details up until now, I did those in a gestural way, focusing on unity and speed, without thinking too much about accuracy and structure. That's why I used a broader, rougher pencil to stay loose and intuitive, and doubled down multiple times the same line. It also served as line weight anyway. Notice that I never zoomed in during the rough sketch at all, something that I'll instead start doing the second time around. When it's time to do the clean version, I create another layer and lower the opacity of the layer below, and use a thinner pencil to fully switch into detail mode. It seems like I'm just tracing the rough sketch, but I'm defining smaller details and also decide on the right line.
I periodically zoom out to see the overall image every now and then, and fill part one after the other, but skip the tricky ones for later to not get stuck.
There are some tips I can give you about line art in general. Overlapping line can really enhance the form with depth, when you can feel what's behind and what's in front. Line art difference between the silhouette and details push the joint further when the emphasis follows an order. The secret is the same old line, confidence, and 100 of redo, undo. Clean line itself is something that can be practiced on its own. It's about curvature control and nailing it in a single stroke. Use the hand stabilizer and even the Bezier tool if needed. But I don't want you to rely too much on these, especially in the beginning. If you are good without tools, then you will be even better with them. Instead, try finding a comfortable position to reach the desired line, by rotating your canvas or even by moving your hand around. The next step is to correctly put the pose into perspective. It primarily involves the concept of foreshortening, where objects appear larger the closer they are to the viewer. Proportions on the canvas are no longer kept in this state, mostly receding to a vanishing point in the distance. Additionally, body parts may be hidden behind another rather than being forced into view, something that beginners often struggle with. Instead, they will pick out based on their anatomical structure. One approach is the call or ring method, where you wrap the body part in question in spring that gradually recedes or expands. This method is smooth and intuitive, but can be easily messed up. Another method is to construct it with simplified 3D form that follows perspective, providing the most accuracy but sometimes feeling stiff. These serve as placeholders onto which the anatomy is later overlaid. There are 4 stages of advanced anatomy. Bones are the foundation and mainly define the proportions.
It is the joints between them that allow movements.
We also saw in the beginning its use as landmarks and details.
A commonly overlooked part of anatomy is the toppling, from the way you should know the simplified, iconic shapes of body parts, because external layers such as fat and skin can smooth form over or become details to the other features present in the body, inside or outside.
And finally, the muscles. Grouping the muscle makes it so much easier to break down the body. Understanding the muscle helps explain the external shape of the body, especially during motion. My tip is that muscles work in antagonistic pair, reflection and extension. Movement occurs as one muscle pulls the bone while the other controls the opposite direction. Finally, you can learn an individual muscle if you want, but it won't necessarily make your joints better. So maybe spend that time to learn something that actually does matter. Let's explore the role of character design in figure drawing.
Character design only in the scope of the body and not a full guide.
Proportion and structure may also change based on several parameters. For instance, gender differences impact skeletal proportion and fat distribution, while age influences muscle tone and the overall proportions as well. A character's build, such as chubby or muscular, is immediately apparent from the contour. Some cases, features may be added or entirely altered, such as with fantasy or sci-fi races. But the silhouette and shape are often the most recognizable elements. The general shape influences the impression the character gives off.
Making the broad image is the priority when designing, with the parameters serving as features or merely references.
We could even talk about the way how the character move, like their mannerism that can reflect their personality to the physics of their movement if the structure deviates from the norm. When you talk about the overall setting of an illustration, or what I like to call quote-unquote composition, one of the primary factors to consider is the art style. Your chosen style will significantly affect how you draw the body and pose through the process of stylization, whether that means simplification or exaggeration. Exaggeration is a powerful tool for emphasis, not just in the features but also the physics. Each style has its own approach to proportions, like in the case of chibi or heroic. Additionally, pose is essential in telling a story. A well-chosen pose can add significant depth and substance to your artwork. A pose might involve interaction with an object or another character.
Composition is just like character design, but instead we design illustrations, and pose is just one piece of a puzzle.
We just quickly glossed over different topics in that short amount of time,
and I hope to explore each of them in depth in future videos, but for now, the next video will be about joint heads.